So these are 10 beginner tips and tricks that I wish I knew before playing Silent Hill 2 Remake. I wanted to make this video since I saw a lot of people saying that they were struggling, so I kind of wanted to help out as a survival horror veteran. Also, if you guys know of any other tips and tricks that would be helpful for beginners, make sure to write them down in the comments. Now let's get started. So for number 1, the game doesn't explain this, but make sure to time your dodges, especially when going up against tougher enemies like nurses, or else they won't work and you'll ultimately get hit. So in other words, it's important to learn enemy movement patterns. One tip to practice this is that once you reach the hospital section of the game and see a bunch of nurses, make sure to kill all but one and then go and save so that you can practice seeing and getting used to her movements. Number 2, change the controls as soon as you start the game, especially if you've played Resident Evil remakes. For some reason, the touchpad is like bound as the button for the inventory, and so I ended up changing it as soon as I started playing the game, so that the touchpad was the map and the triangle button was the inventory. Also, make sure to change the button to take health. Don't make the same mistake of spending a few extra seconds every time trying to remember which button is the map/inventory and accidentally taking health at the start. And by the way, I actually changed the health button to down D-pad. Number 3. As soon as you get the handgun, your strat for dealing with enemies should change immediately. The best strategy involves shooting enemies' legs, much in the same way as Resident Evil 4's combat. This sets them up for a quick takedown/stomp. It's worth noting that when shooting them in the leg, don't aim for their shins or their feet. Instead, aim for their upper thighs since it's a bigger area for you to shoot, so better odds of hitting them, and it works just as good. This strat is especially useful when playing on harder difficulties. Number 4, the game didn't tell me this when I played until way later in the hint section, but you can sneak on enemies. This actually works really well on nurses, since doing this will take them down in 3 hits. The key here is to walk slowly towards the enemy. Some enemies obviously don't react well to light, but nurses seem to be okay with it, and then hit them once and then stomp them twice to 3 times. Number 5, this advice is definitely for brand new players to the survival horror genre, but please, for the love of God, don't waste or rely on the shotgun and rifle. In all honesty, you should be saving those weapons for bosses or mini bosses. The other time you have my permission to use the shotty or the rifle is when you're getting swarmed by enemies and you're about to die. All in all, the game actually gives you tons of ammo, and as explained in my previous tip, with shooting them in the knee, most of your kills will end up coming from your melee weapon. My first playthrough of the OG and the remake were on hard, and I had plenty of ammo to spare since I used the strat mentioned before. Number 6, I've heard some people online say that they always check every corner of every room they go to like a SWAT member, since they're specifically looking for the mannequin enemy types that might be hiding. This strat really isn't necessary, mostly due to the fact that mannequins will literally spawn in.
More of those things.
Bruh.
So even if you catch some in the corner while checking every corner, you're not going to catch all of them, since as you guys just saw, some of them just disappear. I think it's okay to be vigilant, but don't waste too much time on looking at every corner. Not to mention, mannequins don't do that much damage, and after getting hit once, you should be good to dodge and then take it down. Also, you could always rely on sound cues, since mannequins do make sounds before hitting you from the back. Number 7, there are certain sections where it is recommended to run away. For example, you might enter a room and grab what's necessary, and in those situations, there's no reason to stay and fight, especially on harder difficulties. You should be conserving ammunition. And it's also worth noting that if you have enemies chasing you and they're really close, and it's recommended to listen to sound cues and then dodge forward and continue running and rinse and repeat. This is also super helpful for the final boss of the game. Number 8, another tip that I highly recommend is don't always go to the objective. The game has a tendency to almost push you to go to the next objective, either through the use of Maria nagging you to go to the right way, or by using ambient sounds and chase music.
Hey, come on, we gotta catch up to her.
Yeah, I know. It's just, yeah.
In these situations, you definitely want to take it slow and go exploring as much as possible to get ammo and health. Some key areas that tend to do this is when you're moving from one big location to the next. For example, going from like the apartment buildings to the hospital. Number 9, speaking of exploring, another tip that's really helpful is every time you go next to a car or a store window, always break it. Or in other words, every window that you see, you should break. For starters, it's super fun, but the game also has a tendency of hiding health and ammo, as well as sometimes opening up new smaller locations. As mentioned, just get into the habit of breaking glass windows since you never know what you'll find. Number 10. All right, so I have 3 tips here kind of rolled into one, but if you guys ever get stuck in an area, always refer to your map. For starters, the map actually gives you real-time information. So in other words, if you've just completed a puzzle, the map will update. The game also tends to circle areas that are important. Map circles tend to be any locked doors that are needed to progress but require a key. The next tip is always checking every room and keeping an eye on the rooms you can't access that are unlockable. Rooms that are inaccessible will have a squiggly line over it, and as mentioned, rooms that you're able to open in the future should have a circle around them. And the next tip is if all else fails and you've checked every room and nook and cranny, then you've most likely missed a breakable wall that allows you to bypass the locked/inaccessible doors. So make sure to keep an eye out for those breakable walls. And number 11, we actually have a bonus. Another tip worth mentioning that's the same as the OG is that whenever James passes next to an item, he'll turn his head in the direction where that item/enemy is. So always pay attention to James's head. A huge thank you to my viewers that told me this tip when I was playing OG Silent Hill 2 for the very first time live. Click this video right here if you guys want to see more Silent Hill 2 content, and thank you so much for watching.